Well, man, I appreciate you hopping on here.
Yeah, of course.
It's not every day you get to, well, first and foremost, thank you for your service.
Oh
I
no,
think
of
that
course.
goes without saying. Um, you know, when I came across your story, I was instantly captivated. I read a couple excerpts of your book, Ghost of the Valley. And, I think all of us in this world know somebody who's connected to the military, somebody that serves.
Mhm.
I have an uncle who served. He's still in the military. He served multiple tours over in Iraq. I have a close friend that's special forces and countless others, just connected through school and whatnot. But um, a lot of the things that you talk about are, I think, a lot of the things that people like myself and others have as far as questions of their friends and family, but out of respect, they don't ask those questions. And
Yeah.
I don't think anybody could really ever understand what it's actually like to be there. But I know when I was reading through your book, I mean, it's palpable. I think I've watched a lot of movies, I've read a lot of other things, but the way in which you lay things out and really speak from not just your own perspective, but everybody's perspective, it was powerful.
Yeah, I really didn't know what I was doing when it came to the writing portion. I'm a C average student at best growing up, and so I think that's what maybe made the experience a little bit more enjoyable for me is that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have like a rough draft. I didn't brainstorm. I didn't do all those productive things that you probably should do when formatting a book. Essentially, I just kind of sat down because my PTSD was starting to get to me, and up to that point I had tried everything, and so I figured, well, maybe if I put my pen on paper, people had mentioned it before, like people had said, "Hey, man, you got a pretty interesting story as an MP. It's kind of abnormal. It's different. You could tell it from a different perspective. I think you should write a book." And for a lot of years, I just kind of took it as a compliment, and I was like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't really feel like putting myself out there and being vulnerable and have my information just for the world to see and be judged. I'm an emotional guy. I care about what other people think. It is what it is. There's no hiding that. So."
Mhm.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to kind of go through that threshold of doing that. Um, but when I got here to Fort Leonard Wood last August, there's not a lot of stuff to do out here in Missouri, in the middle of nowhere, and uh, and my PTSD was starting to get to me. I didn't have anyone to talk to, and so I figured, well, maybe if I put my pen on paper. People had talked about writing, maybe it'll help. And so there was no chapters. I literally just started from the beginning and started typing away. I didn't want it to be a biography. I wanted to specifically talk about the events that I witnessed and the things that I saw, and I wanted to just kind of, if I was rereading this, say, document, 40 years from now when I'm older, will I remember what it was like being in my own boots? And that's essentially how it was just kind of played out. And then I had people read over it, just to like see what they thought. And people were like, bro, you got to put some chapters above some of these words and call it a day. And I was like, and then I started thinking about it, and then so I figured, fine, I'll do it. But there were some asterisks, there was some underlying issues or demands that I had before I did it. As far as it wasn't going to be about me, it was going to be about things that I witnessed, but it was going to be like kind of a leadership book. It was going to be about things that I saw other people do, and it was going to give back somehow. So essentially, my book is 9 chapters of readable material. It's fairly short. Military dudes normally don't have the attention span, so I'm not trying to create some leadership philosophy book of something you've never heard of before.
Mhm.
And so and there's pictures too, so that always attracts people. Um, and so essentially, it's only like 160 pages of like readable material. The 10th chapter is nothing but websites, phone numbers, and resources. So if veterans pick up my book, they have that information. They can't say they don't have internet or a phone. They literally have everything right there. So that could give them idea to go get help. And there's multiple subjects. It's not just mental health.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, the very end state of it was that a huge portion of my personal proceeds that I get from my publisher are going to a foundation that was established for my lieutenant who was killed, Tyler Parton. So people would learn his name, they would learn his story, and then be given back to a better cause as well. So
Mhm.
hopefully
So
this is just the foundation, but yeah.
Yeah. So is there a process in which you have to take that up through with the military to be able to like go out there and talk about a specific battle, which, I'm sure there's a lot of red tape that kind of goes through with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So especially with me being active duty, I mean, I essentially do not have freedom of speech, and so I have to ask for permission to speak. And so I wrote this whole thing, and I sent it off to the Department of Defense, and they have a publishing section in the Pentagon, and they cleared it, and then I had to send it, or they had to send it to CENTCOM, and CENTCOM, they control Iraq and Afghanistan, all operations that run in that area, and then they had to essentially look at the battles, the things that I was talking about, and clear it for authenticity, that the battles actually took place, that these events are actually unfolded. The awards that were given out were all true to nature. And so once I got cleared of all that, it took like 2 months. It wasn't even that bad. And I got essentially like a memorandum from the Department of Defense saying I was good to go with what I put in there.
So I was thinking like that had to be difficult. And I didn't realize at first that you were active duty, and I was watching
Yeah.
some other podcasts and I heard you mention that.
Yeah.
So the book is based around two different events, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's the, I guess you would say, the heart and soul of the book.
Okay.
Chapter 1 kind of starts you out in a random battle, my second deployment, or like an event, just a troops in contact kind of event, nothing too crazy. But it's just to kind of throw the reader in there, in my mind, second deployment, where I stand, and then it flashes back to my childhood, and just kind of very short chapter of who I am, so the reader could kind of understand that, and then it builds into going to my first duty station, coming down in orders to deploy, going to that first deployment, coming home, dealing with everything, volunteering to go back, and then so there was one big battle my first deployment, another my second, and then the aftermath of it all is essentially just the wrap up, dealing with everything, and kind of where I am today.
Yeah. Now, I mean, 2009, we were pretty much in the heart of fighting over in the Middle East. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely, I'm assuming, somewhat knew what you're signing up for, but I have to imagine, especially as MP, you weren't expecting to have the experiences that you've had to go through when you started.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth,
No,
but that's
no,
kind
that's
of what I
yeah.
was thinking, right?
I mean, we're combat support, so I'm thinking like, okay, if I do go, I was always thinking Iraq. I always wanted to go to Iraq. I always used to watch the Marines in Fallujah, and these videos on whatever that website is, Live Leak and stuff like that. I used to always watch these combat videos. I was always interested, and so I always wanted to go there. But our orders to Iraq were canceled, and we got shipped out to Afghanistan in like 30 days. That first deployment, and I knew nothing about Afghanistan, because Iraq was obviously the hot topic for the news media and stuff like that. And when I got there, we happened to be going to one of the most dangerous places in the world. I mean, the mountain ranges in which I were going to threw back the Russians in the 70s and 80s. They defeat the British. I mean, literally empires have gone to these mountain ranges and completely been annihilated for decades. I mean, for years and years and years. And so our lieutenant was kind of briefing us the history of these guys and the Mujahideen. I mean, they're just some badass motherfucking fighters. They know how to fight, and they're not scared, and you had to respect them for who they were. And so, yeah, but I wasn't really expecting to see as much combat as we did, because we are a combat support role. Like, you might see some here and there. It might be sporadic. It may not be as close. Doctrinally, that's how it's supposed to be, but it was wrong. I mean, we found ourselves in situations that doctrine normally doesn't find us in, but I was surprised. I don't want to say surprised, because we had some damn good leaders, but I think the world, or the rest of the Army, would have been surprised how we reacted, as far as our MPs, like, got a lot of kills. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was chilling, reading through and understanding, there's no way that, I mean, I'm sure everybody gets a base level of training. You understand how to use a firearm. You understand the basic in and outs of war, but you're not getting that same type of intense training that an infantry member is probably getting.
Or SF. Yeah, exactly.
Is it more just human instinct in a moment like that you're drawing on? Because
yeah, I think so. But a lot of my leaders, so I think of our entire company of like 160, 180 MPs that had deployed, I think like maybe 3, if I had to guess, had ever been to Afghanistan. in seeing that type of fighting. The rest of them had been to Iraq, and they saw some decent amount of fighting, but the fighting in Iraq is completely different. I mean, Afghanistan is just the Wild West. The way they fight, it's not. They never hit us with IEDs and would run. I mean, it was a gunslinging battle. They wanted to fight you, and ultimately, we found out over the years they wanted to overrun you completely. And so, a lot of it was just, yeah, I think just human instinct, and a lot of it was training. Prior to the deployment, we kind of had an idea we were going to go to the mountains, and so we trained up that before that first deployment. And I was at Fort Carson, so we used Colorado Rocky Mountains to our advantage, and we'd hike up these things with full gear. We'd elevate, get used to the elevation, our lungs and breathing and stuff like that, and just started to plant ideas in our mind of what we might see. So we had some pretty decent training and by some amazing leaders, so it wasn't too difficult, and we adjusted on the fly pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. So up until the point of, so I guess maybe I'll fast forward, right? So the meat of the story is really around a rescue mission that you found yourself in.
Yeah.
The time that you're in Afghanistan, you kind of expect a certain level of engagement possibly on what you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every day, is it somewhat mundane, even though you're overseas, like leading up to what's happening? Or did you notice kind of a growing sense of tension in and around the area that manifested into that event?
Yeah, I mean, the month before September 2009 was presidential election, so that's always kind of a hot month for the country as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, we started to hear a lot of intelligence reports that there was a lot of enemies moving in the area, and so when our battle kicked off on September 10th, less than a month later, right? Like literally less than a month. September 10th was ours. October 3rd ended up being the deadliest battle in all of the entire war, which most people now know it as the movie The Outpost, Combat Outpost Keating, 2 Medal of Honors, Distinguished Service Cross, 27 Purple Hearts. It's just the craziest battle. And that was the unit I was attached to, was 361 Cav. I was attached to Hatchet platoon, different platoon, but same unit that was stationed out of Bostic, and essentially this platoon, cavalry platoon, went to the Kamdesh, Cop Keating, and defended it against. I don't remember how many Americans, but it was a platoon-sized element versus about 400 Taliban, and the Taliban got into the wire and overran them completely, and then they fought them back. But so yeah, our battle essentially was a prelude to that, and it was less than 30 days before, and so the enemy fighters were using us as target practice for that major battle that they had already planned.
So they were aware of your presence in that area.
Oh yeah.
And kind of proactively took some.
Yeah, but that area was always real hot. That was that Saw Valley, that particular valley that this battle took place. This is when Bin Laden was alive, and he had a safe house in Saw Village, which was a couple hundred meters away from the Pakistan border. So it was easy for him to infiltrate in and out, run operations, dip out, kind of undetected. And there was a SF little base not too far north of Fob Bostic where I was at, and those guys were always trying to find this dude and running operations out of there. So yeah, it was always kind of a tense area going through there.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want you to give too much spoil, because I'd love people to just go out and buy your book. I know you can get it on Amazon. They need to go and check that out. But I mean, can you kind of give a nice preview to what they can read and what that day, kind of the lead up to, and what you were asked to do?
Just that battle in particular?
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, it was a rescue mission. The platoon that we were attached to, they had 2 squads up a mountain. They were completely cut off. And that's all the information we were told. They had some wounded in action Americans and an Afghan army guy. And that's all we were told. We got activated to go pick them up, be a kind of a Casevac or a medevac for them, and take them back to Boston. It was supposed to be a quick, easy mission. And then when we got on ground, there was a first sergeant there that essentially was asking for volunteers. And so in the book, I really paint a picture about, this is chapter 5. I talk about how the things I saw that day were, from my perspective, as a, it was all from my perspective, but it's it really shows how much of a soldier, an 18-year-old private I was. I wasn't making any cool decisions, leading the charge. It was straight, I kind of watched it all unfold, and they asked for volunteers, and I was scared shitless because I didn't really know the situation, had no communications. And I watched these NCOs, I watched my 14 meters volunteer, as well as 3 of the Cav guys. And so it kind of gave me courage, like, okay, well, I'll go. And so this deployment, I was made into a medic. I'm not a 68 whiskey medic, but I got to Afghanistan because the Army sent me to EMT school. That was good enough. And so I volunteered to render my medical services. As soon as we started walking up this mountain, the 8 of us, we just immediately started taking contact from Saw Village, and it was just a Spartan race up the hill. And then very quickly we realized that enemy were really a lot closer in between the 2 elements within frag grenade range, that we had to eliminate some of them in a cornfield. And when we did get up to the Americans, or the cavalry scout guys, we didn't know this at the time, but the snipers that we were going head to head against, I don't know the numbers. I heard that the sniper we were going against had a couple hundred American killed and wounded under his belt. He was a Czechoslovakian sniper hired by the Taliban, very skilled individual who traveled with 2 additional snipers and about another squad element. And the squad element was essentially waiting for us to come up into this draw, and they were going to just close us off essentially. And we couldn't get to them because we were getting told that now LT was dead, and he was laying out in the open about 175 meters from our spot. And the 3 snipers were just trained down into this draw, and we had no way of getting to them. And the rest of the squads were kind of pinned up against the draw behind rocks and whatever they had. And so, so we had to figure it out. And so we had to drop a huge smoke mission, kind of extract them. And then that's when we started working our way down the hill, where, again, I won't go into great detail, but we pretty much got fucked up the whole night, coming down the mountain from Saw Village. And our first sergeant had to call broken arrow. And for those of you who don't know what broken arrow is, it's essentially it's an old Vietnam era term that it's not really official, but it just means that we're on the verge of being overran or overwhelmed, and that if air assets don't come to our location, then we're all going to die. And so every air asset from Bagram came.
So how much ground are you covering down the hill? I mean, you're talking about hours. Is it 100 yards an hour? Is it 10 yards an hour?
No, it's not that bad. But we had night vision goggles, but of course it was a poorly moonlit night. We didn't have proper ambient light. Couldn't use white light because it gives our position away, which ultimately the Afghans that were with us used white light, and it gave our position away, which is why we started taking contact. But, we tried doing the infrared chem lights and spinning them so the convoy could see us. We tried everything. And so our method of trying to recon a route was essentially kick a rock off a ledge, and we just listen to see how long it takes to fall. And if that seems like it's too far for our legs to crumble, then we're not going that way. It's either go left or right. Mm-hmm. And so it was a slow progress, but it did take a couple hours. But once the barrage started coming in, we just started sliding down the mountain to get the fuck down at that point. So, and it got too bad that we needed a C-130 Spectre gunship at F-16 to start dropping some payloads and cover a Black Hawk that would essentially have to hoist out LT's body, as well as some of the other additional wounded that were in the rear, because there was just no way they were going to be able to get down with their wounds. So
it's intense, man. And you received a Bronze Star for that, correct?
Yeah, I got it. Bronze Star with Valor and a Purple Heart.
And I know that's, from what I was listening to, that was a difficult thing at first for you, carrying that around. And I mean, is it more of a survivor's remorse type of thing, or is it?
I fucking hated it. I hated it because, I'm 18 years old. I don't know shit about the world yet. I'm a fucking baby compared to a lot of these guys. And a lot of these guys have done multiple deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan. They've served their country. And like I said from the beginning, it's not that I didn't want to go up the mountain, but I was being a scared little bitch because I didn't know anything. And it took the courage of my leaders to want to inspire me to go. And when I did go, okay, yeah, cool, I did some stuff on the mountain, but I wasn't the only one. So why am I the only one getting this award? The rest of all my other team leaders got arcoms with Valor. So why were there one less than mine when they're the ones that volunteered before me, and they were up there with me the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a long time, it just kind of like, it made me mad. There's obviously haters. There's obviously people going to talk about it. People who weren't even in our unit were like, "Oh, I heard this happen." Like, bro, like you weren't even on the fucking mountain with us. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know how it is, man. Telephone game just takes off, and it's just frustrating because it's one of the most difficult, if not the most worst day of my life, and I'm having to articulate it. Back then it's easy for me to talk about now, but
Mm-hmm.
it was fucking rough, man. And I just, from what I was told later on from my commander, was that, look, yours just was hired because you were performing duties outside your scope of practice. You went up there as a medic, you're not a medic, and you did these things. And so I kind of used that to kind of accept the award mentally for myself. And then same thing with the second one.
Yeah. There was something that you had said in the book that really caught me, where you had a moment with, I don't know if it was a Mujahideen fighter, but an enemy insurgent, where you could have just kind of quickly ended things, but there was a moment, and it seemed probably a lot longer than it was. But I'm assuming you've given a lot of thought and perspective to, at the end of the day, they're just a person in this world, and that they're fighting for something that they believe is right, the way that we're fighting for something that we believe is right. And I heard a podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Dakota Meyer.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Goddamn hero.
Yeah. And he talked a little bit about that. And I'd be curious, I'm sure that doesn't go through your mind all in that second, but in the years since then, it's got to be a trippy thing when you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, both my deployments, even when I was a sergeant, my second deployment, you're young and dumb, and you think that you're invincible, and you think that you're the good guys versus the bad guys, and that everything you do is correct and perfect, and you're just like, fuck them, fuck this, I don't know, just the mentality of it. I'm not saying it's bad or toxic. It's just that was our mentality, and and there was a moment, my second deployment, during that second big battle, in which we were completely surrounded and cut off. There's 16 of us Americans versus 150 enemy fighters, or give or take plus. And we were completely just on the verge of being overrun. I mean, they got within 8 feet of us. And it was fucking rough to, even in that moment, to see the enemy fighter like that. Because then I started thinking, like, not that I disagreed with why we were there and that he didn't deserve it. Like, motherfucker was about to shoot me. So, I mean, I really don't care. Like, he got his. But, in a mature fashion, I had to think, like, this is just a guy doing what he thinks is right, the same as I'm doing myself, And so years later, as I look back on it, I've matured, I've aged. I think I'm a little bit smarter than what I was back then. And so it's easier for me to kind of grasp those concepts and understand the bigger picture. So I don't regret anything, and you have to have that mentality over there, just kill or be killed kind of thing. But I mean, it's all part of it. It's part of growing up. I'm sure there's some of them that are old now that have survived, just like me, sitting around, growing old, and body hurts, and they think of the days that they fought us, So
it's got to be, I mean, not just a perspective enhancer for you, but I think it can be a perspective enhancer for everybody. The impact that writing something like this must have had for you, and you can share that, as far as dealing with PTSD and what is probably still considered a little unconventional, right? It's not typical, especially for, people in your position, to write a book and describe what goes on. But I think it's so important, even for people on the outside who are really insulated to what goes on. It's cliche to say it, but people take it for granted. They take for granted the freedoms that we have here, and it's on full display right now. And without getting political, I just think it would do us all some good to understand what actually occurs deeper than what we typically think about it.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's been rough dealing with PTSD. You know, sometimes you think you have a grasp on it and it's getting better, and then it whoops your ass again. And it's just,
Mhm.
I think it's a reoccurring cycle that never really will really end. But you just kind of have to find ways to combat it. You know, hobbies, talking to people, whatever works for you. It's just it's like anything else. You just got to keep working at it. And so this was one of the things, you know, and I hope that this book helps someone, whether they have PTSD or not, even if that just means having sympathy and understanding what soldiers go through. But yeah, it's been rough just because, like I said, I don't like having my information out there. I don't like talking about myself, but it's almost like in a position that I'm in, talking about a book that I wrote, you kind of have to, and you don't have a fucking
Mhm.
choice. You know, I just hate feeling so narcissistic, and then that doesn't really help my condition much at all either. But you know, I've had some great supporters in the
Yeah.
community, both civilian and veteran, that have just kind of supported the entire situation and have kind of been open arms. And I'm actually surprised. I thought I was going to get a little more backlash,
Mhm.
again, just because there's naturally going to be haters and people are assholes and stuff like that. But been very surprised, and at least if there are, they don't say it to my face. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I would think that, you know, you're telling the story of a lot of people who aren't able to tell that story now too, right?
yeah,
Because, you know, you mentioned it, and as the one thing that I really noticed is you wrote it from a we perspective. You
mhm.
really talked about it from, you know, this is what occurred, and there's a lot of nobility in that just from self. But I think, you know, you're able to give a voice to the people that don't have one after that time.
Yeah, and it's not even those that just you know, that have died. It's just, you know, even though like the lowest soldiers. You know, there's a moment in the second battle where you know, I'm getting ready to go back out to the fight, and you know, I'm just talking about things that I'm seeing other people do. You know, the things that I don't want to say are taken for granted, but they're just forgotten and brushed over. Like my driver Garcia calling in close air support. You know, he's getting F-16s to come in. He's calling in certain directions. He's calling their fly status from east to west. He's making sure they come in on good infills and exfills. Like Gunner, fucking 18 years old, damn near almost not even 18. Over here, has got the most kills of the deployment. He's got 60 something kills. He's re-racking weapons. He's getting, you know, he's providing enough cover fire for me to move. It's like I'm not the only one who did shit that day. And a lot of these things go unnoticed and these names go unnoticed. So even if I could just provide a fucking sentence that
Mhm.
this guy did this, then you know, hopefully I could tell the story of, you know, something that they did. You know, that's ultimately what I want. Is I want people to walk away from the book understanding that, like, this is just my story. It's a story. I'm talking really just 2 days of my 2 years there. And there's many stories like this, some of people who are no longer with us that can't provide those stories, and others who feel like they don't have a voice because, like you said before, I'm a senior non-commissioned officer. I'm considered not a very smart individual because I enlisted, as opposed to the officer status who are well educated and can articulate their words, and who normally get the book deals because they turn into high level generals and stuff like that. But I'm not General Mattis or somebody who's providing a new leadership philosophy of something you've never heard before. I'm just providing raw stories from individuals who went into the shit. And I want people to understand, whether that's, you know, the veteran community or civilian community, that there are some badass motherfucking Americans that have walked this face of the earth before us. And I want them to know their names, and that you should be happy that they're on your side for sure.
Mhm. That's awesome. It really is. Now, you mentioned your lieutenant who unfortunately passed away during this deployment, that you're tied to his organization and that this book directly benefits that. Are you able to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Tyler Parton Foundation, Tyler was, or I should, LT was, he was very big into like the civil affairs community projects. He loved hanging out with the kids, and so his found, you know, when he was killed, he had mentioned these things in a lot of letters to his family, and so his family started this foundation that essentially will give back to those children in need overseas and stuff like that, to give them a better life, because that's what ultimately what Tyler would have wanted. So
That's so cool. That's really awesome. So, how much time do you have in currently?
just over 12. I hit 13 next February, so I still
Okay.
got some time.
Okay. You going to make a
Yeah.
long haul of it at this point?
Yeah, I'm not doing anything else. Might as well.
um, so I see you a lot on social media, doing a lot of motivation and things like that. Can you share where everybody can go and find your social? And then also, I know Amazon, but is there other mediums where people can go and find the book? Is there an audio version possible, or is that something you consider?
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as social media, they could find my personal page, Sean Tobias Ambriz, and then the Ghost of the Valley Facebook page, title Ghost of the Valley, and then same thing with Instagram, Ghost of the Valley Instagram, and then my personal Instagram is Chief_Pink Mist. So yeah, I essentially use my social media platforms lately to give back to the veteran community. So I've been partnering up with a lot of veteran businesses, people who are just starting out, who need help, and I essentially do like little giveaways and to hopefully spark their social media so that those veterans can be successful. So any chance that I get to help a veteran, it doesn't have to just be a business. That I'm trying to hop on and do that. And I've partnered with a couple different companies like Veteran with my boy Rocco. We're trying to help the health system for veterans and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to use my social media platform for that instance. And then as far as where they could find the book, they could get it on Amazon. And then the digital platforms, they could get it on Nook and Kindle. And then we just completed the audio book because there's a book group on the East Coast and I know of that they're blind and they want to read the book. And so I've been working diligently to get them the book so that they could hear it. And so it's all said and done. I'm just waiting for my publisher to essentially get it out there. And then when it comes to the audio book, we're doing something a little different. So my publisher hired a guy who's got one of those sexy voices and he read my entire book. And essentially, when you read my book, like if you actually read the hard copy, as you're reading the book, especially like say during battles, there's some italicized verbiage as you read. And that's my internal thoughts of what I'm thinking in that moment. And I'm talking to myself and stuff like that. I essentially went and I recorded all that stuff here at a local recording studio and sent that to the guy. And so the book is going to be dual narrated. So he'll read it. And then when something's popping off in a book and my internal thoughts kick in, you'll actually hear my voice come in.
That's so cool. I was going to ask you if you were going to do that. Nothing bothers me worse than I'll listen to an audio book and I'm like, oh my God, you should have been a part of that process. And that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really, really cool. I like the idea too, with kind of the internal thoughts.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully everyone likes it. So
Well, awesome, man. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on here. Wish you nothing but continued success. Are any plans for other books in the future or anything else down this road, or is this kind of
yeah, no, unless another deployment kicks up and something crazy happens, this is probably it. I mean, I've pretty much told everything up to my life up to this point. I've been asked to co-author some books and stuff like that, just kind of help out with some like leadership type stuff. But
mhm.
yeah, it's a process, and I really put it all into this one. So yeah, I don't really know. I think my next call. I think the book, like I said, was a foundation, a base support. But I think my next calling is something with the veteran community. I don't know what it is, but I just want to help veterans. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think I mean, you're leading by example. So whether that's going out and speaking or providing, assistance, just even through your notoriety, man, any way that I can ever help, certainly let me know. I'll post some links to all your stuff when this launches. And again, man, nothing but success. And thank you again for all the service. And good luck in the future with everything.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on today.
No problem, buddy.